A very warm welcome to this talk. In life, bad things do occur to even good people. And when bad things occur, a person suffers a setback in the form of either abuse, either the physical abuse or the mental abuse or the sexual abuse, or there are cases when a person suffers from bereavement, the loved one goes away, or there are natural calamities and people suffer a setback. But many times, when the setback is too hard to handle, then there is a trauma, and it is the duty of either a psychologist or a therapist or a healer to take you out of trauma. Recently, when I was reading a book, I was referred in the book to a person named Mr. Lee Cartwright and his amazing work on in the world of trauma healing. So I tried to explore it, and when I started to use it in my daily psychological practice, the results were really astonishing. Now, Mr. Lee is not with us, but he used to work in Santa Fe and was very popular there. He had a whole bunch of people lined up for treatment for days to come all together. And I have heard that he was just amazing at what he did. So, today, to talk more on his work on trauma healing, I have his wife who has been a part and parcel of developing his programs, and she has seen firsthand how he went from one technique to the other technique, and she is a healer herself and does a lot of body work and trauma healing. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome Miss Ursula Hofer to this program. A very warm welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Nandwani. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Very welcoming.
I am really astonished, by the work of your late husband, Mr. Lee Cartwright, because once I started using his techniques in my daily practice, my patients really were, out of that trauma. They used to feel lighter, and that prompted me, to contact you. And I want you today to share your experience regarding trauma healing world, regarding the techniques which Mr. Lee Cartwright developed, and shed some more light on this important aspect.
So my husband, he meditated every night for 2 hours. And so he really tried to connect and not just tried, obviously, he connected to some information. And so that's sort of how he developed the work, is by meditating and connecting and then allowing that information to come through him. So a lot of time he would refer to that. So he might talk to a person and say, I think we need to work with this or that. And then he would say, but I don't really know. Don't believe me at all, till I go and connect. And then something totally different might show up. So he was very, you could call it humble, but in a way it was like he was very aware that he was just a vehicle for something to come through him. And that's what, was so wonderful. At the same time, I think sometimes he felt nearly overwhelmed because it just kept coming. Sometimes he would say, can I just write more down or take a break? Because it just kept coming, the information. And he used a lot of information. Obviously, a lot of time we would get up, in the morning, and then he would go, oh, I got this information, let's try it out. So we would work on each other to check it out, because he didn't just want to let this information. It's sort of like what you're doing. I so appreciate that, that you're going, okay, here's this information, here are the YouTubes, let's experiment and see if this is real. So he constantly did that. So every day we would work on each other and benefit from it as well, right? Because in a way we needed to update our systems. But at the same time, he got then to see how it felt. And then he would also use these different approaches in his office, of course. Yeah. So that was sort of an evolvement. But there is a basic understanding, I think, that he felt that trauma affects our emotion, but a lot of time that trauma is in our neurology, that it is in our body. And by working with our bodies, then we can shift our emotional and physical realities.
Excellent. In fact, humility has always been the ornament of great souls. But I have really seen that there are different techniques which he had adopted. One of the techniques was, simply by talking, simply by repeating some sentences, he would catch the trauma of a person and make it go away. And, when I tried with one of my clients, his problem was that he said that when I was born, I was taken out of the womb of my mother with the help of forceps, and those forceps had left a mark on my forehead, on the sides, on the temples of my forehead. And in the school, people used to laugh at me that I am having that kind of forceps. And it was, a very, very traumatic for him to have, gone through that particular kind of experience. So, doctor, can you do something about it? I said, yes, I have a wonderful technique. Let me try this on you. So he started speaking. In fact, that was the first technique which I was trying, which is called Mending Broken Hearts by Mr. Lee Cartwright. And when he was on the fifth or the sixth sentence, he went like, he could not understand what happened suddenly. And after that, he felt a lot lighter. The same trauma, the same incident, which on a scale of 1 to 10, he said that it haunts me about 8. Just after that particular thing, it said, now it is not haunting me anymore. It is just like 1 or about 0. And that is from where I started to, follow the works of Mr. Lee Cartwright and trying to integrate more of his works. So one part of Mr. Lee's healings, consisted of the talking skill. Just speak about the various parts of the nervous system, making sure that this is the traumatic event. So is this in various parts of the electromagnetic system of the heart, or the neurological system of the brain, or of the pelvic region, the gastrointestinal tract? This was something which was amazing. And I wanted to also let you know one of my other experiences with this particular neurological meditation of Mending Broken Hearts. Uh, there was one person from South India. So he came to me and visited me in the hospital, and he said, the doctor, I have witnessed 4 deaths in my family. First, my fiance passed over in 2019. Then, after my fiance, my mother passed away within 6 months. Then, in the next year, my grandfather passed away. Then, in the next year, my grandmother passed away. And he is a very intelligent chap doing his PhD research, and he's from a different place. And he says that I'm not very pally with my father. Our views are different. Now, doctor, please help me. I have got no place to turn to. And I said, okay. So I made this 5-step program for him, and we started doing, which included a lot of Mr. Lee Cartwright's work. And suddenly, just after 2 sittings, he says that, doctor, now I am able to sleep. Now my hands don't tremble anymore. So it is then, you get to an understanding that how great can only be, the effect of speaking simple sentences, because the trauma is somewhere and body knows the name of the body parts when we speak, which your husband explained. Do you have any such experiences to share with our audience?
I'm just in awe how well you're understanding Lee's work. It's just beautiful how you're describing it. And he talked a lot about that the body has the knowingness. It's like when I say heart, or when I say, any part, that the body can then connect. And I think that's such an essential aspect of this work, that there is that intelligence in our body, and that it understands it, and then it responds. And then, because what trauma really in his understanding, and I think there are a lot of trauma experts which would agree to this, when we are experiencing trauma, it basically sort of locks the body or part of a body and the energy bodies in that particular moment, because we are in a survival situation and we are surviving it. So we are doing, everything is doing an excellent job because we are surviving, right? But then the different systems sort of get like, we survived and that was smart, and it don't quite know how to update
Right.
the nervous system and the physiology in that sense. And then it, you know, affects the emotions and everything, and it sort of takes away the joy of life in a way, because you can't really, you are not in the present moment. You can't, it's like you can't see the colors, you can't see the beauty in yourself or in other people. You're just being, you know, underneath this cloud in a way. And for some people it's more cloud, and some people it's more contraction, and some people, and we know from when we, you know, study the trauma model, that some people are more in hyperarousal and alert, and they can't calm down. So there are different ways it shows up, but all of it really has a lot to do with that there's not really any present moment life happening for the person, and it's agony. It really is agony, and people feel like, what am I doing wrong? I'm trying. And, you know, I remember Lee talking about, and I have had that, people who have been meditating for years and go, but I'm doing everything I know. Why isn't it changing, you know? And I have done this and I've done that.
No, that is very important, because as he explained, that when we undergo a trauma, part of our system lives that trauma, is still living that trauma, and part of our system is living the present moment. So we are divided into various parts. Part of ourself is still witnessing that particular incident which happened in the past, which is behind us, but still our one part of the body is still experiencing that as an ongoing reality. And then the multiple number of traumas a person has, his consciousness is divided into that many number of events or time frames. And the more the time frames a person is into, the less he is present in the present moment. And you beautifully summarize that if a person is trying to meditate, how I mean how important is his healings in the spiritual world as well. Because if somebody is trying to meditate and he is already divided, he is not whole, he is not um, uh, uh, totally present in the present moment, because some of his mind is still in the suffering which happened years ago, then he is not able to alleviate to the higher realms of consciousness, just because in the first place he wasn't together. So, and I have witnessed this, you know, bringing smiles to people's faces who have lost their loved ones. One of my clients, you know, he had his wife died in an accident in around 2018. Now, since then, in the WhatsApp chat, his DP had he was there and with his wife, and they were sharing a glass of Coke. In spite of the fact that now there had been 3 years since the incident had taken place, still that particular DP was there. So somewhere every day he used to see that and register that. And the mother who used to visit me for her other ailments, she said, you know, now he's not the same man anymore. He has lost his mind. He used to be a happy chap. And we started doing this mending broken hearts neurological meditation. And then what happens? And then what happens is, after 7 to 8 days, he comes to me with the mother. So the mother is also there, and this man, 45, 47 years old man, he's also there. And he is saying to his mother, why are you so negative? Life is to be enjoyed, doesn't really matter. You see, he's got back that liveliness, that aliveness, that that integrity, that wholeness in him. So that makes a change in people's life. Which brings me to his other techniques of body work, which he called shifting consciousness through dimensions. So, as in the psychological world, there are power therapies, including the EMDR therapy, where we move our eyes in the left and the right direction to deal with a traumatic event. And he noticed some other things, that, you know, if the eye movement from the left to the right can bring relief in a particular trauma, then maybe, you know, our movement from up to down or back and front might also help people to get out of their trauma. And he developed this wonderful technique of shifting consciousness through dimensions, one dimension being left and right, the other dimension being above and below, and the third dimension being front and back. And this was an amazing work. And since you are a body healer yourself, I would like you to enlighten us something on these body techniques of Mr. Lee Cartwright.
I think that it was a huge aspect of his work, that three-dimensional, the importance of three dimension, because when he was, again, meditating and asking that he wanted to know what sort of his life was about, right? Because it took a few years. At one point, he had that like insight, which he felt was given to him, that again, the body is not, we did a lot of EMDR, and we practiced, we explored it, and EMDR, they don't really necessarily talk about to the dimension, the side dimension.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we know that there are a lot of neurological structures in our bodies which get affected by moving our eyes. And we also know that in EMDR, sometimes they don't use the eyes, they use tapping and different things, but it's always about left, right, right, left. So it's always about movement across the midline. And so then Lee was again meditating, and then he realized that the importance of a dimension up down, and you could call that, there are different ways of people talking about it. Some people talk about earth, heaven, or universe, earth, so it's like that. Or some people talk about vertical axis, because I think it's a very different way of life when we have vertical access to our own reality. Right. Then if we just are oriented towards the world around us, and we become much more reactive, because then if someone is blinking their eyes in a funny way and we take it personal, then it's like there's all that projection going on. And so I think the more we can be connected with our vertical energy, then we can sort of not only be in present time, but we can also sort of have our sense of self. And then that allows us to connect very different with the world around us. It sort of reminds me of like when I used to, years ago, I would go walk in the neighborhood a lot. And I was suddenly realizing that I couldn't really feel my body while I was walking, that I was only having my antennas out. And so my antennas would check everything. Is there a dog going to come? Is there something going to come? It's like, it was just like I was constantly on alert and a little scared, but also it felt like important, because it was real that a dog could just come out of somewhere and jump on me. And, so it wasn't just made up. But at the same time, I noticed that I couldn't track my inner self, that I was only antennas. So to me, that's sort of like that hyper alert part, again, when we have trauma. And in our childhood, some of us, that's how it was, right? It's like, yeah, if a parent suddenly goes off and gets really angry and like, so we constantly track the world around us, but it's not really possible to go, oh, maybe we know, oh, this is pretty scary, but that's about how far it goes. It's just like, so to me, again, it's like when we look at that up-down dimension, it's like then we can also work with trauma in a way, because then that allows us to come in present time and get the body to connect in the up-down, in the nervous system, because obviously the spinal cord has like different spinal tracts. And then there are the sympathetic cords. And so, it's so beautiful, because one can talk to those structures too. So it's not like one has to be a body worker for that. It's like one can talk to, for example, the sympathetic nerve chains, right? And they are such an essential part. And to me, the sympathetic nerve chains, which go about an inch, they come off the spine and they start and go up a little bit, but they don't go into the cranium. And then they go all the way down, and they actually connect, the two sides connect at the coccyx. So we can talk to them. And if they can talk to each other as a first thing, and then maybe they can even talk to our parasympathetic nervous system in some ways. So it's all totally, it's all totally translatable, the physiology into the verbal thing. And that's why Lee, he would study the physiology for hours and hours and hours. And now when I teach, I have this class which is called anatomy, but in a way, it's like I'm teaching. I mean, obviously, it's all anatomy, but I'm sort of using a lot of the golden nuggets he sort of put forth, and then I have people sort of tune into those systems and start talking to them in their way, So there are many ways of doing it. So, but I haven't answered so we have up, down, and then the front, back.
Yeah.
There are different, interpretation. Some people feel like the front is the future and the back is the past. And when for example, in NLP, and I don't know if that's familiar to you, but they do this incredible thing where they say, when you think of a trauma or an event, they go, where do you place that in your energy field? Right. And a lot of times when there is a trauma which isn't, which is still in the physiology, then people place it in front of them. And it's literally, they don't have a future because there is this thing sitting right in front of them. And so whenever they are trying to move forward, they are hitting the thing. So that's just another way of tracking that. So again, when they get, when all the dimensions comes into place, then these traumatic events, they can be in the back, and we can, there are whole statistics nowadays. They have statistics that about 37% of people, when they have experienced trauma, they can use it to excel, right? They can use it like an engine, a forest. It's like, I have to, a challenge you can move through. Right. And the other percent, and not that they are bad people, but they get buried in it. So that's, and it's not like, again, they are better people or worse people. It's just some, they have more resources, or maybe they have a fortune to meet you and get to work with you or with someone else, or they could work with Lee, or, then they get to use that challenge, which was from a trauma, and they get to use that energy and actually move forward instead of being like shut off.
Yeah, people call it making the setbacks, turning the setbacks into setups for success.
Right.
Yeah, so this is also nice. And, in my practice, I've also seen that a lot of people who are suffering from physical disorders for which there is no organic cause, then there is some kind of a trauma which is bothering them. And once you take that trauma out, suddenly their physical symptoms start to alleviate. Recently, I had a doctor, an anesthesiologist by profession, and she had some problematic personal past history, because of which I suggested her this comprehensive trauma resolution program. And after a few sittings, what she said is something very significant. She said that, for the past 3 years, I've been suffering from psoriasis, and no medicine is able to, cure it or give me relief. So I was in a terrible state of affairs. But after this program, suddenly the itch in my psoriasis zones has gone. And she has given me a video feedback as well. Now, you see, so these problems, where the problems are factual, the problems are actual, they are physical problems, but either they are not responding to the medicines which usually make them respond to, or it is not diagnosable why this problem is happening. I have seen that a lot of times the evil behind it, the problematic cause, lies in the traumatic events which a person has not been able to resolve. And it is in this sense that Mr. Lee Cartwright's work is really tremendous, because it brings people back on the track, it brings light in their life, and it makes their life better, more livable, more alive, and more joyful. I am so grateful to you, Miss Ursula, that you took all the time out today and had a wonderful talk with us regarding some of his works. I hope to see you again sometime and talk about some specific healing aspects of his healing called the shifting consciousness through dimensions, so that we also enlighten a lot of people who do not know about his healing techniques. We make them understand from where he comes and where can these techniques be more helpful for the society in general. Thank you very much for being with me today.
Thank you, Professor Nanand. Thank you so much.